Hey Ben, it's good to see you, man. I'm so
Great to
excited
see
that you're
you.
with us today and that you're going to speak to our governing board lunch on this Consecration Sunday lead up. Um, I've already told these folks that you're one of my closest, oldest friends. We've known each other for 24 years now. You're an Episcopal priest serving in the Episcopal Diocese of West Texas, and you currently serve as a chaplain at TMI Episcopal School in San Antonio. So I didn't know what TMI stood for. I'm a little embarrassed about that. Tell us what TMI means.
Oh, no problem. I always say, hey, first of all, it's great to be with y'all. I'm really looking forward to being with y'all in person next week. And I love your rector, and therefore I love your parish. And I'm so excited to be a part of this amazing time in your year. TMI, first of all, as a chaplain, you need to know that I work with high school and middle schoolers all day. And so that should explain everything you need to know about me. If anything seems a little bit off, it's because I'm surrounded by teenagers all day, every day. TMI Episcopal School is a school that was founded 131 years ago. The TMI stands for Texas Military Institute. We are no longer an all military, all boys school as we were when we were founded, but we hold on to the name because we still have a military component, a JROTC leadership program that's really exciting. But I've often said that we don't get enough out of the TMI part, too much information part in our marketing strategies at school here. But it's a great little Episcopal school here on the borders of San Antonio. And we're doing some great work with young people. And it's a real joy and a pleasure to get to be with y'all today.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, let's dive right in because I'm excited for these folks to get to hear you talk about the spirituality of giving a little bit. So, my first question for you is what makes stewardship and preaching about stewardship and the spirituality of giving spiritual for you?
Yeah. So for me, it comes in where it begins is in our creation. You know, we are created in the image and likeness of God.
Hmm.
That's foundational. I don't know that's boy. He's really starting out. He's starting out big with stewardship, but it's true. We are created in this image and likeness of love. We're created in this image and likeness of who God is in the world, and we have these attributes that are part of our core being. And so one of the biblical principles, the ideas that really fuels the spirituality of generosity and giving for me actually comes from one of the most famous passages in all of Scripture. My granddaddy was a Baptist, and he would say, "For God so loved the world
Hmm.
that He gave."
Hmm.
And that's the formula for me for the spirituality of giving. That God loves, therefore God gives.
Hmm.
We are created in that image and likeness, and therefore we are loving and we are generous. We are built to give. We are built to practice this spirituality of generosity. And there are ways that the church teaches us and that our communities gather around that can help shape that and hone that so that the image and likeness of generosity and love can be made known in the world. And so I always say when people ask me what's the best biblical reason for giving, and I just say John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave. And when we're wired to do the same, it's hard for us sometimes, which is why we practice, which is why we do the things we do. Like any spirituality, if we want to be better, if we want to go deeper, we have to practice. Spirituality is a practice, and this is certainly a big, important piece of that for us.
Beautiful. Wow, that makes me think of it's a great segue for the next question I have. What you're saying makes me think of it. So, one of the things we talk about around Good Shepherd a lot, around spiritual practice and the spirituality of giving is intention. So
Mm-hmm.
there are been times in my life when I've been what I call a token giver, when I've given to the church in the early days, like when I remember to, or what's in my pocket. That's a real different thing than what Consecration Sunday invites us to, which is this intention around percentage-based giving. So
Mm-hmm.
could you talk to us a little bit about how a commitment to percentage-based intentional giving has affected you?
Absolutely. So my favorite story about how intentional commitment to percentage giving changed me was the first time I ever filled out a pledge card in the church that I was a part of as a young adult. I was a young youth minister. I wasn't making very much money. I was, living hand to mouth in this little apartment here in San Antonio. And pledge season rolled around, and there wasn't as much good teaching that was coming my way at that point, or I wasn't hearing it. And so I filled out a pledge card, and I mentioned my Baptist granddaddy, and my Baptist granddaddy would always tell me about the tithe, 10%. So I immediately took 10% of whatever it was I was making at the time and put it on a pledge card. And the great part about the story for me is that I failed miserably. I don't even know if I got 1 month in. I couldn't do it. It was out of reach for me. It wasn't thoughtful. I didn't say my prayers about it. I just dove right in, and it's not one of these stories where all of a sudden I had this windfall and was able to give no problem. It was, I couldn't do it. I couldn't make rent. I couldn't do all the things. And I was mortified by that. I was mortified by that failure. And I went to my rector at the time, and I told him, I was like, I've messed up. I don't know what to do here. And he laughed. And I remember it was that loving, careful laugh of a good pastor. And he said, you don't need to be as concerned about what you're giving. Just be concerned about the commitment you're making. And I've never forgotten that advice. And in addition to having a Baptist granddad, I've got a deeply Episcopalian father. And my deeply Episcopalian father would remind me of the prayer we use for young people all the time. It says, allow them to take failure not as a measure of their worth, but as a chance for a new start. So it was in that moment that I began to understand, at least personally, that this commitment to giving was when I was intentional about a percentage or intentional about what I was making. My spirit and my heart were right in the right place. I just hadn't done the homework. I hadn't done my intentionality around what steps I needed to take to get that journey going. And that failure is exactly what allowed me to start a new path toward a practice of generosity that has lasted to today. And I always think about, and I'm really grateful. It sounds strange, but I'm really grateful for that abject failure, because out of it brought the wisdom of the notion that committing to this proportion, this percentage, this piece of what I had been given was the important part. And it's in that knowledge that I began to explore that and listen to that and pay attention to that. And so the spiritual practice of commitment to an increasing percentage for me changed over time. And as I got married and became a priest and grew my family, that level of practice became the thing that really was the lever, because I still had to make a budget. I still had to do all these things, but it was more about my need to give versus, how much that figure was. And so I had to look at what I had been given, or as a good friend of mine loves to say, not so much of how much of my money I was budgeting to give, but how much of God's money I was planning on keeping. And if I could just look at that thoughtfully, prayerfully, in a spiritual practice, it would be a lever that changed how much generosity affected my life. And that's been true since those early days. I think I was 22 when that happened, or 23. So it's been an ongoing piece of the puzzle for me, and it continues to evolve and change and grow. Every year, my wife and I sit down and think about the percentage of what we're giving, and my granddad would be proud. We are above a tithe now, and but that's where we are, and that's on our journey. And when we set up our whole commitment to this together as a family, so that we can practice that together.
Love it. So again, great segue to the next question. Along the way, you've developed this devotion to the spiritual practice of giving. So what are the spiritual growth results that you've experienced as a result of your devotion to the spiritual practice of giving?
This is my favorite place to talk. This is why I care so much about stewardship, preaching and teaching. I think it is the lever, the place where we as human beings can get in touch with that theological truth that we are created in the image and likeness of God better than anything else I know. Because I am wired, I don't know about y'all, but I'm wired. I'm a creature of habit. I'm a creature of, if I do this, this will happen. I worry, I get concerned. And over again, as my wife and I have practiced this plan of committed giving, and a conversation in our family about how we have a need to give so that we can be more connected to all we've been given. It grows and it changes me, and and what's even more beautiful about it is I've seen the effect that it has on others. Because as I mentioned, that first failure was before I was married, before I had a family. I was a young man fresh out of school. And so my wife, who came into this life with me, began to ask questions about, well, so why do you do this? And I had to have a good answer about, especially for my wife, who Hendree knows well. I had to have a good answer for why this was a spiritual practice, not just something that we were budgeting towards. And I began to see a growth and a change in her. And one of our family mottos now is never resist a generous urge. And to have seen that develop over, the 20 years we've been married, and, we've brought our daughter into it now, and she has a language of generosity and spirituality that's all her own, but I think formed and shaped by the lessons that we've learned throughout the years. And, I've seen it in my own family, I think, is the easy answer. But the other byproduct, and the reason I love this kind of engagement so much, is because I see it in congregations. I see it in communities. When you begin to talk about generosity as a spiritual practice and the commitment to giving as a spiritual practice, it changes the game for communities. Because you don't just think about the budget. You don't just think about how we're going to fund this or that. You begin to recognize we're a community of people created in the image and likeness of God, and that image and likeness is built for generous, radical love in the communities we inhabit. And so what you'll see at Good Shepherd is the more committed you get to this practice of renewing and reconnecting to this idea, the more fruit it will bear. And God only knows what that fruit will be, but it will be loving, it will be generous, and it will be beautiful in the world. And it'll be a model that you can be proud of.
Wow. Beautifully put. I'm so excited for you to be with us next Sunday. So Ben, what's the final word? What's the invitation you're making to everybody in this room between now and the time you arrive, and just a few days from now, I guess?
Well, this is my favorite part of New Consecration Sunday. It's kind of the gotcha moment that I actually really like. It's, so for those of you in the room who've been around stewardship before, or maybe you've heard of different plans where the people in the room are going to call and ask for money. Don't worry, that's not it. We're not going to ask you to call people and ask them to fill out a pledge card. We're not going to get you to call people and ask them for money. What we are going to do, what I really need you to do, good people of Good Shepherd, is to invite people to New Consecration Sunday. Invite them to come be a part of this community for this day. And then I'll invite them to join me in this way of giving and in this transformational spiritual practice that makes such a huge difference in people's lives. This is about you as the leadership of Good Shepherd asking the community to come together to hear a message that could potentially change their life. one of the things I want you to think about is when you make that invitation to come to church, you never know when the opportunity to give may be just the thing that somebody needs to go that next step in their spiritual journey. You may have an impact by just inviting somebody to come to a celebration with a guest preacher and a good meal. This is the thing that may do for your community what it did for me all those years ago, which was set me on a path to a practice of spirituality that is life-giving, transformative, and connects me more and more to the truth that I am a beloved child of God that is wired to be radically generous and incredibly loving at every step of the journey. So you get the opportunity, dear ones, to invite people to be a part of this. And I am so grateful that you've said yes to be a leader. And I'm so grateful that you will help pack the pews at Good Shepherd so I can see all of these faces that I have loved because I love this community and have loved this community because I love your rector. So I'm looking forward to being with y'all next week.
Wow, perfect. Wow, Ben, we're all so excited for you to be with us next Sunday. Thanks so much for taking the time today to record this interview with me. We're fired up, man, and we'll see you soon.
I'm excited. My pleasure.
Peace, brother.
Peace.